I think Denmark feels like the right one to start on. It's definitely one that I think more than anything can exemplify one aspect of this podcast, which is actually that elections abroad actually have implications for the UK. We've seen that the Labour Party in the UK has really tried to emulate the Danish Social Democrat model, whether that mainly on immigration, but also I think the kind of combination with a bit more left-wing elements for some stuff, especially on perhaps energy and stuff, where we also know that Denmark is very strong in clean energy, albeit with a different bit of a model to us, but specifically on migration, that's tried to be kind of copied, for lack of a better word. We've seen Labour Party members go over to Denmark. So what are the effects of that in this election? Why don't we give it a go?
All right. Can you give us a brief synopsis of what happened in Denmark last week?
So Denmark's political system historically was one always of two blocks. You had the centre-left bloc, the left bloc really it's called, which was always led by the Social Democrats, nearly always finished as the main first party, sometimes not going into government because the smaller parties that make up the bloc have not got as many as the right bloc themselves. The right bloc had historically always been led by the centre-right liberal Venstre party, which nonsensically translates to left in English. Some history there. So these two blocks had always been the main governing mechanism. Then enter the fray in the 2023 election, Lars Løkke Rasmussen, who we'll go on to talk about quite a lot, who says, I want to end this dominance of bloc politics, and he creates his own centrist force. And this makes Frederiksen, who had been working with more left-wing parties that weren't so anti-immigration as her, go into coalition in the last election with Rasmussen and the centre-right Venstre party, with also the support of one smaller social liberal party. So despite that occurring, the blocs are not necessarily dead as of yet. We've seen Frederiksen still talking about wanting to go into coalition with the members of her left-wing bloc after this election if they got the victory. We've seen the same on the right. But we now know there is the option across the centre. So what happened? What really happened was the even greater fragmentation of the Danish political results. We saw the Social Democrats win convincingly, but by far with their lowest share ever. And the other parties on the left have mainly been the benefit of that. But we've seen also the far right go up, which is perhaps surprising given the anti-immigration push. And we've seen the traditional centre-right party, Venstre, get its lowest result ever as well. And it only just remained the biggest party in the right bloc, potentially because one of the other libertarian parties on the right leader admitted using cocaine during the campaign.
What? Say that.
He said, I don't really know the details of it, but he essentially kind of defended his use of cocaine. And I guess it goes with the libertarian stance. But that kind of imploded there.
You think if you're a politician, you got that far in your career, it's something you just admit.
Yeah.
Once the election's over.
Yeah.
When you got the high stakes. I always think as well, like if you're like a political leader, obviously the responsibility of the party is very much in your hands, especially in Denmark, where it's not like Britain, where you don't have a first past the post and sort of they have individual characters. It's a list, right?
Yeah.
So the party is really influential. And
exactly.
you've basically just
yeah
got rid of 10 of your MPs because you've admitted doing a stupid thing.
They still got their best result ever, but it could have been someone. They could have been the leader of the right-wing bloc, that which could have, if they'd gone well enough, made him Prime Minister. Anyway, so yeah, we'll see. And as we've said, this has been a large influence in the UK. Actually, the Danish UK influence goes back a long way. Denmark actually joined the EU, but the EEC back then, because its economy was so tied to Britain's that it felt it had to once the UK joined. So it's actually a big historical partnership, and now we see that reflected in the two governing parties.
So I guess one thing we have to talk about with Denmark and the UK, and that sort of copying that Labour government is trying to do with the Social Democrats, is Labour's approach to immigration going hardline, doing stuff like thinking about reforming the ACHR, essentially having refugees say you can have their having their asylum cases, keep them retested, and if their country becomes safe, to send them back home in 10 years' time. These hardline, obviously, they're going to make changes to indefinite leave to remain, so that it's going to increase the amount of years that you're going to have to stay in Britain before you can stay here permanently and start to claim benefits. A whole host of changes the Home Office is trying to put in. Are these changes from Labour a sensible way to try and win back voters and win elections? Because that's what the Social Democrats in Denmark have done.
At first glance, you would have to say no, because I think perhaps similarly to the UK, what we have seen is the rise in the left to Frederiksen. So the Socialist People's Party on the left has become the second party in the election, and that's perhaps comparable to the Greens in the UK. And we've also seen the far right slightly surge in support in this election. So if you look at the individual results of this election, it doesn't. But I think that's a bit looking at the small picture. I mean, the Scandinavian countries, because of their historical, very kind of ethnically homogeneous structure.
If you're going to talk about this, so I lived in Sweden for 6 months, and at the
Sweden,
university I studied at, they had a eugenics lab up until the 1970s.
There you go.
1970s, they were practicing eugenics in Sweden. Right. You don't really hear that mentioned.
No, it's very homogenous up there. And in the other countries, the far right parties have...
Oh, Sweden Democrats are massive.
Exactly, 20%. We've seen it in Finland being the biggest party, maybe, after an election, I believe.
I'll have to check that.
I think you have to link that to the left having been able to take ownership of that debate and keep their historic constituency base of people who are wanting to have a big government, but also be anti-immigration, very nativist kind of politics. So this election, it seems to be that the anti-immigration approach hasn't worked for the Social Democrats themselves. But if you look at the overall results, with time, I think it has been able to solidify the left in Denmark. But it should also be said that perhaps the Danish voter base is more attached to that Social Democrat party historically. Is that necessarily the case in the UK as much? There is much more progressivism all round, I think, even in poor areas of Denmark.
Think one thing they have to keep in mind, if you're Labour, is that in Denmark and Scandinavia in general, there is a high trust in the political system.
Yeah.
Their, parties, politicians, the way the state works, they have a farm. Britain is at large, I'd say, a very libertarian country, rather distrustful. I mean, we're like America. I mean, not as bad as they are, but we're very distrustful of the state. In Sweden, for example, everyone's tax returns are published to the public. It's
There's the joke people enjoy giving their tax returns.
Yeah.
Then.
But you can search up someone's name and you can find out how much they paid in tax in Sweden. Anyone. And then here it's like a big deal. It's like, did Jeremy Corbyn publish his tax returns? Is Farage going to publish his tax returns? That's not a question in Sweden. It's like, did Joe from across the road publish his tax returns? So it's the trust in the system there is a lot stronger. So I think they have to keep that in mind. If you're Labour, you're doing these changes, which are generally going to affect a lot of people's lives. Is this going to grow distrust in the system? Do the people that want to see these immigration reforms push through, do they have the trust in the party anyway that when they push them through, they're still going to do it? I mean, I've still, I don't know about you, you see on the comments anyway, Labour can say we've done 30,000 deportations and people are still going to be like, oh, I still see them in my streets.
No.
They're stealing all of our money anyway. You can say what you like and put all these policies through and tell people and shout it from the roofs, but people are going to trust that you've done it.
That's a good point.
Sure.
It's a much smaller country, I guess, with a language that doesn't have the... I think it has been controlled better than in Sweden, for example, where we have seen the centre-left party there adopt a more anti-immigration approach. But I think it had been a bit more out of control beforehand when they let people in and then kind of said, we apologise that we're kind of full, we're not going to be able to let anyone else in. That's what Löfven, the ex-Prime Minister, did there. And so it makes it kind of less credible. Frederiksen has more pushed that she really is anti-immigration from the start. And it's given her that kind of appeal, I guess.
But I must say, obviously, immigration and Denmark and UK, that is the main focus right now. But I almost think that the analysis of immigration and that is 3 years too late. I think, definitely the Social Democrats won the last election because of their hardline stance on immigration.
Yeah.
For me, that's definite. I think that's why Labour have copied them.
Yeah.
But this election, I think, actually, it was the wealth tax. Frederiksen, as a centre-left party, she's almost...
and there's obviously the elephant in the room of Greenland as well.
And Greenland, actually, that's a very good point. So there's the two things, but we'll do the wealth tax first. I mean, our wealth taxes, is that going to be the next big populist, the next big solution to offer to voters in order to win elections?
It's definitely something the left is doing across Europe. I think in France with the Zucman tax as well, and obviously talks in the UK, especially from the Green Party. I don't think Frederiksen is really going to go for that. I think that was something that was put out there as a beeline kind of to some of the more leftist elements in the coalition. I think she was somewhat acceptant that she was going to end up with the centre, But the ideal thing in terms of ease of coalition was to the left, but these parties, because of the immigration and her newer coalition, were hesitant to be with her. So I think she really had to push forward her economic leftism here. And it might have attracted some voters, but enough to win? I wouldn't think so, because the other parties on the left, who obviously called for that as well, really did grow. So I think it's hard. I think if there was one thing that really shifted it, it probably was Greenland, and the fact she called this election.
For context, I mean, the Danish election, this was a snap election. It was planned for the end of this year.
I think, yeah.
So she's called this early. And now, we've seen now that actually European leaders can do quite well by opposing Trump. Sanchez is doing it in Spain. Even Keir Starmer opposing it in the UK has gone down well. But in Greenland, in Denmark, it's a whole different story, because obviously they own Greenland as a possession, and Trump's constant ridiculous threats that he's going to try and invade, he's going to do this and that, because it's of national security to America, is really, really upset the Danish. No, and she's really stood up strong to him. They're just calling his bluff. I mean, and you've seen that Danes started a petition on, not even a petition, what do you call it when you crowdfunding? They did the crowdfund to buy up California.
Yeah,
that's a joke.
Brilliant. The Danes. They seem direct people that are actually quite fun. They've got a good sense of humour behind them.
Yeah, I think, well, look, I'm going to offend the Swedes here, but I've been told that the Danes are just the fun Swedes.
Oh, really? Well,
by Sweden
can't make
themselves.
Such partisan statements there, but my experience is perhaps similar.
Oh, sorry, Sweden.
Yeah, so I think, obviously, we saw Mark Carney, right, in Canada being elected with a huge margin. And perhaps the difference here is that pretty much the whole Danish political spectrum, including the far right once it got to Greenland, had to protect Denmark, whereas we'd seen in Canada, Poilievre taking a Trumpist stance before Trump got elected. So I think, of course, Frederiksen definitely got a boost out of it, but it wasn't enough for her to have a Carney, super election victory.
Yeah.
Not
having the longest border in the world between your two countries is probably part of that.
Exactly.
But certainly, if there's one other leader that was going to benefit, it was going to be Frederiksen. And, it's crazy the effect that Trump is having. You think, he's coming in, he wants Europe to do what he wants a bunch of leaders that are going to listen to him. And he probably would have had a bunch of leaders that had listened to him if Poilievre, who was set to win until he came in and started demanding that Canada becomes the 51st state. The Danish Verde, you said they're called, sorry?
Venstre,
the left party, but they're actually centre-right. They would have won probably most likely if Trump hadn't started threatening Greenland. All these countries across Europe that even Le Pen is now taking an un-Trump stance because she knows it's the only way for looking ahead for 2027.
Absolutely.
And you just think, this guy, he's got no comment. Anyway, it's just nuts.
So just looking to the coalitions, it's going to have to essentially be a coalition across the centre. Who that will entail is going to be complicated. I think Frederiksen will want at least one other component from her left-wing coalition, but it's going to have to go with more than one party from the centre-right regardless. So perhaps the Conservative Party, which is different to the main centre-right party there. It's going to have to be bigger than it was this time, so there'll be more space for disagreement. I'm sure that the centrist parties in the kind of bloc themselves will want to probably leave another centrist party in opposition, so we won't see a kind of national unity across the centre. But I find it very hard to see Rasmussen working with the far left party, which has to do to support the left bloc, because just ideologically, huge disparity there. And I think it would be very silly of Rasmussen, having been a right bloc prime minister, to then break away and say, we need to find a third way alternative, to then go and align with the whole rest of the right bloc, which also includes the far right, who he has worked with before. But it would make his whole political project meaningless, the kind of Borgen political project people have joked about for its similarity with the TV series, which I highly recommend anyone watches who is involved.
I need to go and watch these, especially now that you're not allowed to watch House of Cards anymore, because you got Kevin Spacey's. So, I mean, I did enjoy House of Cards, but that was before the allegations came out. But now Borgen instead, because I'm telling you.
The Borgen is literally about someone who was prime minister, made a comeback to become foreign minister, and made their own centrist party to defeat the bloc politics and align them together. So the parallels are extreme. The only difference is she was originally with the left bloc, he was with the right bloc, but other than that, it's. And
the Danish accent is a joy to listen to.
The scenes of the prime minister cycling into work. Mark Rutte style are also very, very funny. So,